Is a News 12 Connecticut special program. Connecticut Votes 2007.
Welcome to this week's edition of Focus on Connecticut. It's our Connecticut 2007 debates. Another one, this one the town of Orange. Let me introduce our guests to you. They are Paul Tarbox, he's the Democrat, and First Selectman James Zeoli is the Republican, one term in office. Thank you both for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you.
And by the way, in case you want to watch this debate again or tell your friends about it, we're going to be putting all of our debates this year on our digital channel. That's IO Digital Extra. If you have the digital service, just go to channel 612 and you can choose the debate you want to watch. It'll be there throughout the election season until after the votes have been cast.
Very good.
I like to always begin these debates with your one issue, your take on the most important issue for the town of Orange, and then we'll get into all the others. But if I could just start with what you think is the key issue.
Well, I think the key issue is taxes and spending, kind of together as a combined front. I believe that the majority of people are really struggling lately with increased energy and fuel costs, and I think we have to do innovative approaches to look towards how to best save. I mean, we've had a reval that came in and actually increased taxes. We have purchases that have gone through, and ultimately what we really need to do is look to see how we can trim our budget down and try to save money for people.
Mr. Zeoli?
We agree, just in different areas of it. The town of Orange, on the business side of the town of Orange, if you review the budget, is very lean. Unfortunately, the larger part that's driving our budget is education, both with the elementary school system and the Amity school system. That makes up over 66% of our town budget, of a $52 million budget. So being cognizant of that fact and the fact that energy costs have risen and all the expenses of operating a business have risen, one of the first things that we reviewed and changed was the senior tax stabilization program. And instead of it being a flat $160,000 as had been funded in previous years, it hadn't been updated in 5 years, we tied it directly to the budget with a 0.32% of the operating budget of the town, of the entire budget. And with that number that's available to our seniors that qualify grows as the budget grows. This year it was almost $400 discount. We also raised the cap as far as income. We went from $42,000 to $46,000, and that's currently under review by a senior leadership group again, and we probably will be adjusting it again every 2 years or so. Seems to be the norm in regards to updating this, reviewing what people's lifestyles, expense are, hardships, and we make more available to our community members that have done their time and educated their children and all in the community in the past. And we're understanding of, struggling both of young and old people in the town. So that is really one of our biggest driving factors.
Do you see ways in which that can be changed?
Well, we have a very high undesignated fund balance, which is over 15%. I think for the most part, we can actually probably lower that to safer levels at 10%, which would be conservatively a good way to have a protection in case of an unforeseen emergency, but also would afford to return some of that money and most likely a credit to the taxpayers, which will ease the future tax bills. I think the way we look at some of our department spending, I think a lot of times government budgets tend to come up, and most time budget administrators have no incentive to save money. I mean, generally you take that money away if they come in under. So I think you need to take a portion of that money and for the most part have them return it, but give them that portion as a capital expense of their choice, which will give them an incentive to actually go through and save money, but it wouldn't hurt their department. It would actually help them out in a way. Plus it would return money back to the budget.
Any thoughts on that suggestion?
We have done that already. With environmental concerns, we've done oil and stone resurfacing of a lot of roads. But with the environmental impacts, they've changed the makeup of the oil that holds the stone to the roads. And I've been rather unhappy with that the last couple of years. And so we've started a new program of actually milling down roads 4 to 6 inches and repaving completely, basically building a new road from the existing roadbed that is there. We just completed several different roads in town, Turkey Hill Road being one of them, over a half-mile long. We were able to do the whole job for just under $100,000 in 2 days. We then did 2 sections on Dogwood Road, which is another highly traveled road in the town connecting Route 34 to Route 1. And we just did a large portion of Dog Burn Road, which goes from Route 34 into Woodbridge. And this is our way of giving back to the people. We had to do repairs to the library at a cost of over $30,000. The roof had leaked since the building was built. It's only about 6 years old. Required extensive repairs, first to find leaks and then to repair that, and then to repair the sheetrock and all in the rotunda. That was a $30,000 expense. We have sidewalks and other parts of buildings that are in dire need of repair. That all comes out of capital expenditure money. At this point, there was $410,000 designated for those repairs. And we hope to do some more. We will be presenting to the Board of Selectmen an additional parking lot at High Plains Community Center. We're in dire need of more parking at the community center, and it's been in the works for quite a while. It just was a matter of putting the right amount of money with the project, and without making it abusive and obnoxious sitting out in front of the community center. The Board of Selectmen just agreed. We haven't had a bulky trash pickup in the community in 6 or 7 years. We were able to encumber enough money, over $40,000, that I saw fit that we will have it. This was started by a senior leadership group from our community services, and we are funding that. That was approved at the Board of Selectmen meeting at our September meeting, and that will be taking place in October. You can't just take money from the fund balance and falsely inject it into the budget, because then that'll give you a false mill rate decrease or increase, because that's one-time money that is non-recurring. So we have to use it to expend on projects that the community benefits from, so that it doesn't give false numbers or little smoke and mirrors, I guess has been said in the past, to your town operating budget.
You want to follow up on any of those projects, or?
Well, I mean, I agree that the town needs a lot of improvements in different areas, and I think that way to do the project is to pretty much save money on the budget and essentially bring dollars back by trying to save the revenue. It's been done a lot in different towns, and there's ways to innovatively save money. And I mean, we have a different view on how to accomplish it. I'll be laying it out in the future on my view of how to handle taxes that will be going to the residents. But effectively, I think we both understand that there's a need for a lot of this stuff to be handled, because we really do need a lot of improvements. Mm-hmm. Another thing, he mentioned the bulk pickup. I'm sorry, and I'm going door to door a lot as a candidate for first selectman, and I hear a lot of residents complain about amenities compared to taxes, and they make a comparison to a lot of other towns, and essentially some of the things that are available to them. So I mean, I think that's something we need to review. We do a lot for our seniors, and we do a lot for our residents, but we really need to take another in-depth look at the surrounding communities and how they have amenities towards them and what we could do.
I'll be waiting to see what his plan is on that.
One of the big issues in the race 2 years ago, and it's back again this year, is open space. There was a controversial referendum in town over a farm property that was a developer had purchased, and there was a question of whether the town was going to let it be developed or take over some of it. When all was said and done, the town purchased about 2/3 of that property.
Yeah,
if I have my number right.
44 of 66 acres.
And you've been very critical of the way that was handled.
Well, My opponent tends to criticize the previous administrations on their method for trying to acquire that property. And the previous administration, under Mitch Goldblatt, had acquired 2 appraisals on that property for $3 million and had secured a grant for $2.5 million from the legislature. Now, the way we actually handled it this last time is we negotiated, and I didn't see it being something that was done well. It seemed like we negotiated with a gun to our head. We overpaid for the property, in my view, and in the view of many residents. And the fact of the matter is, we're scrambling now for a state grant to try to cover that. I understand the fact we now have an appraisal that supports the original conclusion, but based on the numbers we used, if you bought a house for $400,000 in 2000, essentially it'd be worth $2.8 million now. And with that type of math, there'd be nobody left in Orange because everybody would have sold their home. It's just my view that we overpaid on the property, and that's my position. Before
we get Mr. Zeoli's response on that, if you hadn't done that, then that land would have been developed. And is that an acceptable alternative to you?
Well, I think you have to set, as a fiduciary agent, you have to set stringent conditions. And you have to be willing to get the best price because you're dealing with taxpayer money, and that's a sacred commodity. I mean, you have to make sure you don't overspend. And that's why in the future I've laid out an ordinance proposal that stipulates the fact that you have to have 2 independent appraisals. You have to have sanctioning by some of the government bodies for the town, such as Park and Rec and the Land Trust, and be on open space priority list. You'll have to have all applicable state and federal grants applied for. Anybody in a position of any type of conflict of interest has to recuse themselves, and the entire process has to be very open towards the residents, where they're consistently informed throughout the entirety of it. And I think that'll protect residents overall from any administration, Democratic or Republican, in the future by having a set process that we consistently follow.
So you inform.
You inform. You inform when Mr. Tarbox speaks of conflict. He's speaking of the fact that I have walked on that property since I was 11 years old. I have known that property intimately, which was one of the biggest reasons why I knew that the town should own it. I knew that property better than probably anybody. The town should have purchased the whole property. It was originally offered to the previous administration, if we're going to go down that road, for $1.2 million verbally. That didn't happen. It was then offered, it was put on the public market at $4.5 million. There was some discussion back and forth with the town. The Ewan family members who were talking with the town never felt that there was true interest at that time. During all of those negotiations, I recused myself every time. Once the property was sold to a private developer, it was no longer connected in any way, shape, or form to Jim Zeoli. The developer proceeded with proposals for that property. He had 7 lots approved, 6 more in the pipeline to be approved on the property that was offered. That was part of what the town did finally acquire. He came to me. I did not go to the developer. He came, he called one day, wanted to meet with myself and the town attorney. I was quite stunned, quite honestly, because he could have made a lot of money on this. He had already spent a lot of money on engineering and all. We met with him. His price was quite high when it started. We walked it back and forth over a 5-month period. When we finally got down to seriousness of it, I had already appointed a open space search committee, because when I took office, I couldn't find any criteria, any paperwork left behind for evaluation of any open space that the town was considering. It may have been somewhere in the past. I've been told that years ago there was criteria. Tom, I couldn't find any. So this committee got together, and one of their first charges was to draw up a list of criteria, which they used as recently as last week, evaluating 2 adjoining properties that have now just come forward in the last couple weeks, people interested in preserving. That criteria is a 9-point criteria that was developed by the Open Space Search Committee as part of this process. I'd be glad to, anybody can see it, it's public information. You have to be very cognizant of the town and taxpayer money in indebtedness. We took that evaluation very seriously. There was no grant proposals available from the state of Connecticut at that point. They had not come forward. The town needed to proceed with this possible purchase because of a timeline that the developer was under. Look, you're either going to buy it by such and such a time, or I will start the process of developing. He had roadfront lots that were ready to go. It went to referendum, and as you stated, it was a very hotly contested referendum. I don't ever remember so many people coming out for a referendum. A town budget, $52 million town budget, we get 600 people, 700 people come out. This one, over 4,000 people, I think, came out, 3,000 or 4,000 people. It was quite flattering. You got the voice of the people, and the vote was close. Within a couple hundred votes, 178 votes, I think. Mm-hmm. However, that's the will of the people. They decided to buy it. We had appraisals done because a grant process did happen, and we have applied for it, and we are in the running for a good grant. We've gotten some preliminary discussion on that, but the appraisal, we paid $4,300,000. Here's the appraisal that went to the state of Connecticut. My predecessor has read this appraisal. He took it home, had a copy of it, and it came in at $4,340,000. So you can bark all you want about the value and did we get taken advantage of or not. It is what it is. The people voted. Jim Zeoli did the negotiations for it, and Jim Zeoli is very happy that the town bought this. It preserves road frontage on 2 roads extensively, but ultimately, I take responsibility for negotiation. The people of the town of Orange own that property, not Jim.
Do you want to do any more barking on what he just said?
I'll do a little barking on that one. Essentially, though, the developer ended up purchasing this property for $3.5 million, and that was 66 acres. The town bought 44 acres, 18 of which being wetlands. A year later, and we paid $4.4 million. And I view that's entirely too high. I've never seen any type of real estate market boom that fast, specifically what actually the real estate market's slowing. And I think the majority of people are seeing that with house sales prices. In any way you want to say it, I believe that we got a bad deal on this. I'm not questioning Mr. Zeoli's negotiating ability, but I am saying I think he got a bad deal. And I do think the developer made a lot of money despite what your claim was, sir.
I didn't say he didn't make a lot of money,
Well,
but
sure.
that's business. That's business. Isn't your headquarters in property that he owns on the Post Road?
Ironic.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about property on the Post Road. I appreciate the segue because that's more development, that's business, that's where tax dollars come in. Are there any concerns about that kind of development vis-a-vis the rest of Orange?
Well, I think that economic development is always going to be important towards your commercial district because the more economic development, it means the less tax burden for your residents. It seems the majority of our stores have seemed to filter between, well, Milford and West Haven. It's a consistent loop where we get stores and we lose them. But it seems like we're on a pace now where we're losing more stores than we're gaining. And my opponent's on the record saying the fact that it's kind of a cycle process that's happened. They come and then go. Where I grew up in the military, and I've always believed in a difference between proactive and reactive situations. An old platoon sergeant once told me that being proactive is anticipating a situation and trying to make sure that situation comes out for the best for you. Where being reactive is waiting for the situation to happen and then letting that define your actions. I think we need to be a lot more aggressive in trying to attract businesses in. I think we need to look at competing areas and try to see how we can offer tax incentives. And I think ultimately just the major box shops, they're going to go to different communities and they're going to come to us, but I think we need to establish a niche. Again, we used to have Furniture Row, but the majority of those stores unfortunately have left. Lazy Boy, Hitchcock Plaza, Drexel Heritage, they've since gone elsewhere. And I think we need to establish another niche, and it's probably going to be more upscale stores because we have less frontage than our neighbors. So I think it's very key for us to get on that because it's essential for lowering tax burdens on our residents.
The Post Road?
Well, the Post Road and the whole commercial area, it's a living, breathing piece of the community. Unfortunately, you do have change in business The Drexel building that Paul referred to, Drexel Furniture, was unfortunately a bankruptcy, which is why that building became vacant. It's a lovely, gorgeous, beautiful building. The Porch and Patio building, also a bankruptcy of business. The family that owned it for over 60 years ran it very successfully. Unfortunately, it was then sold, and the people who took it over weren't quite as business savvy, possibly, or turns in the market. Another bankruptcy. This does happen.
Do you agree with the niche concept?
Well, stores move. It's very difficult to develop a niche concept with specialized stores when you have so many different landlords. We're very fortunate right now. One of the closest shopping centers to Milford has Trader Joe's, has a Talbot's Outlet, and LL Bean is now leasing 13,000 square feet. They will be opening with a soft opening the end of this month. They'll have a grand opening the beginning of October. You have to rely on a lot of your landlords and property managers that own these properties. Under my direction, Paul Grimmer, our economic development director, and the corporation, we have put together a flyer, one that went out with available properties on the Post Road and in the commercial industrial area behind it. We will be doing another fall mailer, and we did that in a targeted manner down into New York and Fairfield, Westchester County, and some were mailed out abroad to representatives of some of the larger companies. We just had another property, a 24-acre property, right across from Christmas Tree Shops. It was a nursery business for many, many years. Unfortunately, it fell on hard times. It just went through a court sale. It was purchased by a family business down here, as a matter of fact, in Norwalk. Wonderful people to deal with, and they will be proposing some new, great business proposal for the town. It's somewhat confidential at this time, but it fits that market very well and will generate many tax dollars in that area.
You mentioned market. And before this debate ends, I have to ask you about one of the most controversial issues that we've been covering for years, whether it's Orange or any other community, and that is Stu Leonard's market in the town of Orange. Are you both on the same page with that?
I don't know what page Mr. Tarbox is on.
It surprised me in all I've read for today that I didn't see any discussion about whether Stu should come to Orange or not.
Well, I'm of the mind that any business that's going to come to Orange and pay $700,000 in taxes, it's essential towards trying to reduce the tax burden on our residents. I understand there was concern before about traffic, and I believe we widen the roads and we have plans in place, and we can always revisit that policy, but I'd rather have the $700,000 a year coming in than not.
And the neighbors who are so concerned about it coming in there because of the increase in traffic and so on, what would you say to them?
I would say it's gone through a process. It's gone through our town boards. It's been approved. It's being challenged in court. But essentially, it's almost like the few are holding up the progress of the many. And I would challenge them to try to adapt to something that I believe that would help out the entirety of the town.
Your stance on?
Very interesting thought. Stu Leonard's by itself is a quality merchant, interesting store. I think their biggest concern of that group that Mr. Tarbox refers to was the traffic impact overall on the community. They did have some concerns which, surprisingly to us, were sent by the judge, allowed to go back to court to be reheard. You know, an area sometimes changes too. With Yale buying the Bear site that straddles the Orange-West Haven line, they're now calling it their West Haven campus. And what this other developer that I just alluded to purchasing on the other side of the Stu Leonard, that whole 95 area right there at the exit, will be kind of with a scientific twist to it. Stu Leonard will be right in the middle of that. It may increase the value of his property even more than a grocery store. I don't know. Only he can make that call. But the group that is opposing it is not a town group. They're a private group. The town of Orange is on this because of the fact that we have to defend our boards and commissions for their decisions. However, just about 2 weeks ago, I received notice that the attorney representing Stu Leonard's, who was a former town attorney prior to my administration, asked for an extension of time to file paperwork for this court case. So it wasn't the town of Orange or the Save Our Neighborhood group that held this up at this
Gentlemen,
time.
we don't get any extensions of time here. We've run out of it. And I thank you both for joining us. Appreciate your discussing the issues in Orange and making us all aware of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us as well. Please stay tuned. The news continues.